letter from Karandar in Los Angeles that Prabhupada's traveling and everyone should invite him to their temple. And Karandar said, of course he won't go, but it's the etiquette for the disciple to invite the guru to visit the temple. So I was absolutely sure that while Prabhupada might travel to Europe or something, one or two temples, he wasn't going to go around the world, what to speak of come to Australia. And so I wrote him the letter, the form letter. I put in every persuasive argument and every embellishment. Said, we're just dying for you to come here, fully confident that that would never happen. And gosh, 2 or 3 weeks later, they said Prabhupada's in India, they're having a big program in Bombay at the Kosh Maidan, and that he wanted to come to Australia right afterwards. Please send tickets for 3 people. We were stunned. We never thought that Prabhupada would come to Australia. And as far as 3 tickets for 3 people, our income was $100 a week. Maybe that was a good week going out and selling back to us. Where were we going to come up with $3,000? So we put up like one of those thermometers on the board for fundraising. And lo and behold, there was a devotee there. And he came up to me one day and he said, I would like to facilitate Prabhupada's coming to Australia. I heard you need $3,000. And he just sold a house. I got the tickets for Prabhupada and he came to Australia. He came with Bhagavan and Padmavati, who'd just been married, and he came with the deities, Radha Gopinath, that had been used at that Kosh Maidan Pandal. Bhagavan sat on the plane with the deities in his lap.
There was a whole bunch of devotees that had joined recently. Some had just joined that week, 7 days ago, some just 2 days ago. But Prabhupada decided he was just going to initiate everybody. And when Prabhupada arrived, Balimadan and Bhagavan were carrying Radha Krishna deities. So Srila Prabhupada obviously wanted that there were some Brahmins. So we got initiation. 5 of us got first and second initiation simultaneously. Of course, I didn't know what a Brahmin was. I hadn't a clue really what initiation meant. Although I did understand about following certain principles and chanting rounds. But at some point someone announced, okay, we're going to have 5 Brahmins here, so you need Brahmin threads. And Balimardan took off a thread that he was wearing around.
And Prabhupada started singing the Brahma Samhita prayers, Chintamani Prakara Manaso, and they just quieted down. And the Pandal program started.
Before the Pandal program began, some reporters came to interview Srila Prabhupada, and one of them challenged, what is the point of spending so much money, making so many arrangements for this Pandal, when the money could be used for better purposes, to feed people? Srila Prabhupada replied, the purpose of the Pandal is simply to give people a chance to come and hear. Where has the Pandal come from? I went to America and I simply gave people a chance to hear. And because they heard, now they have come with me to India and they've made the Pandal.
Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is reaching now from Calcutta to the New Delhi airport for attending the 9 days discourse of Srimad Bhagavatam. All the extended guests are welcoming him including the Mayor of Delhi, Hansraj Gupta, MLA of Delhi State, member of our ad hoc committee, who will arrange all the discourses in New Delhi. The place is very difficult to get discourses in New Delhi, but by the arrangement with the government of India, the mayor could arrange everything perfectly.
What an appropriate event for Srila Prabhupada to be received as a very important person at the Delhi Palam Airport when he arrives for the first Delhi Pandal in Connaught Circus, and many members of the government were invited to greet Srila Prabhupada. Gurdas is the official host. Srila Prabhupada is always so much untouched by praise. He humbly receives whatever level of consciousness that his disciples have been awarded with, and receives it with such humility.
Now this is the first magazine Prabhupada is seeing printed for this occasion from Delhi, called Back to Godhead in Hindi, Bhagavad Darshan. And he was very pleased that our Hindi magazine is coming first time in India.
You can watch him observing people and their progress in their spiritual life. So perceptive. He was able to see externally and internally the progress of his disciples. I find that so thrilling to watch the behavior. And he seems oblivious to anything other than the bhakti, the advancement in Krishna consciousness. He gives the same message country after country, encourages each disciple. But it was very appropriate for someone who had lived and served in Delhi in the late 50s and early 60s, single-handedly alone, with no help, and just within 10 years, such a tremendous change of appreciation. Prabhupada was big news. When these pandals happened in India, in Bombay and Delhi and Calcutta, they were very widely covered, and the society of leaders were very aware of Prabhupada's presence, all the way from the Prime Minister on down through the cabinet. The Prime Minister herself was very appreciative of our Krishna consciousness movement, and through some of the honorary members of Parliament who spoke on her behalf to her, she was helpful in the early years of our Krishna consciousness movement, met with the devotees, and gave a good word. That was Prime Minister Indira Gandhi.
When he got back to where we were staying from the airport, he invited everyone into his room, and he was just kind of like lounging on these pillows, and he looked so youthful and effulgent. It was just totally a different experience than seeing him in America. And he was kind of like laughing and joking about how bad the milk was in Calcutta. The milk in Calcutta is finished. He'd just come from Calcutta. I was just so dumbstruck by this experience of seeing my spiritual master in this mood, this informal mood, and feeling so unworthy that I couldn't, I'd look up at him, and he looked so effulgent, it hurt my eyes. I couldn't even, so I thought, okay, I'll start by looking at his feet. And so I started looking at his feet, and then I moved up. It was almost like offering arti with my eyes, I kind of like moved up his transcendental body till I got to his face. And when I beheld his face, he was transformed in his appearance. And I started trembling, and tears started pouring. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and it was not a physical form at all that I'd ever seen, but it was Prabhupada, but it was like transformed into this exquisite kind of otherworldly beauty that you never see on this planet, and I almost fainted. Seeing Prabhupada's appearance transform was like a tangible proof to me that he was a being from the spiritual plane, the spiritual world, in our midst. And every once in a while the veil would lift from our eyes and we'd get a little glimpse, by Prabhupada's mercy.
This is literally the first day of the Delhi Pandal. There's the wonderful asana, and behind those curtains are the incredibly beautiful deities of Radha Gokulananda, who were officially installed by Srila Prabhupada at this time, on the occasion of the Delhi Pandal. There was an instance for both the Pandal in Delhi, the first Bombay Pandal. Those deities went to Australia and New Zealand. These went to the Manor. And in Jaipur, the Radha Govinda deities, which ultimately went to New York. Prabhupada considered that these festival programs were an installation of the deity. In other words, they were worshipped in his presence. So for a pure devotee to be introducing them to worship is naturally a form of installation. So these deities, there were different pastimes in these three places of London and New York and Dallas, where devotees actually made some adjustment on the Archa Vigraha in some small way. And when Prabhupada heard that, he said, no, these deities have already been worshipped. This should not take place. So it so happened that I was the person that was arranging for their worship and installation and that aspect of the pandal. And shortly after the end of that program, I literally fell unconscious into a coma for 3 days.
One evening, an American young man, or hooligan, came forward to the stage. He was bare-chested with a leather vest. He had tattoos all over his body. He had chains hanging from his neck, and he had wild, long hair. And he came up to the stage in a very aggressive mood. He wanted to challenge Srila Prabhupada. So immediately Prabhupada's disciples rushed forward to keep him away. But Srila Prabhupada surprised us all and said, no, let him come on the stage. So Prabhupada had him come on the stage. He had the disciples give him a cushion or asana to sit in. And Prabhupada had the disciples put a microphone in front of him. He said, have you realized yourself within yourself? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes. Then the young man was sort of taken aback. And he said, how old is the Bhagavad Gita? Srila Prabhupada said, 5,000 years. Then the young man began to spout, no, according to my authorities, according to my information, Bhagavad Gita is only about 1,000 years old. And Prabhupada said, that's nonsense. Then the young man asked another challenging question, and Prabhupada finally said, no, you answer my question now. What is the process for learning Bhagavad Gita? And the young man said, no, I asked you first. You answer my question first. And Prabhupada retorted, no, I'm not your servant. I don't have to answer your question. You answer my question. What is the process for learning Bhagavad Gita? So eventually, the two were shouting at each other, and Prabhupada motioned, and the disciples escorted the man from the stage. And then Srila Prabhupada proceeded to explain what the process for receiving the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is, and that is submissive oral reception, not by challenging. Now, I was in the audience distributing books at the time, and the incident created pandemonium in the audience, and the whole audience was polarized, some in favor of Prabhupada and some in favor of the young man. The ones that were sympathetic to the young man got up and surrounded us, started to challenge us, and say, your Guru Maharaj should have answered his question. So the mood was so agitated that all of us that were distributing in the audience sort of made our way as quickly as possible back to the area of the stage. But later we realized what Prabhupada had done. He had created a situation to illustrate how one is unable to learn Bhagavad Gita. And in contrast, Srila Prabhupada explained what the real process is, and that is by submissive hearing from the authority.
My job, one of them was to invite chief guests to the program, and so I thought it would be a good idea to, because we did this in London, have titles for what Prabhupada would talk about, and have guests that would sometimes have something to do with the theme. One of the chief guests was James George, the Canadian ambassador to India, who was very favorable. I think his talk was appreciated by the populace as well as any of the chief guests, if not more. So we invited Dr. Atmaram, the chief scientist, and he talked on how religion and science actually don't have to be at odds with each other. And then Prabhupada spoke on, like Easy Journey to Other Planets type of a scientific talk. So we invited Hans Raj Gupta, the mayor of Delhi, who was a really good friend of Prabhupada. It was more anecdotal, how Prabhupada continued and persevered, started the League of Devotees and printed the Srimad Bhagavatams. It was very enlightening to us because Prabhupada really did persevere at the beginning of many of the things that we take for granted and made them happen.
This is the first expansion of Srila Prabhupada's energy that has become the Glory of India project today. Srila Prabhupada, when he left for the West, knew he was going to come back and inundate India with Krishna consciousness, just the way Lord Chaitanya inundated the subcontinent of India with Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada's destiny was to do that. And when he brought his disciples back from the West, who were enthusiastic but very new disciples, he started sending them various places for preaching work. So Delhi, Calcutta, and Bombay were the first three big cities that Srila Prabhupada worked on, and because this was the capital, it was important. We were only there for maybe a month, but that month seems like it could have been 100 years. It was so important at the time. So these were just the very little beginning foundation blocks of what later became the Delhi ISKCON Temple project.
Prabhupada
took us to Vrindavan. And this was like the ultimate experience for us. Prabhupada coming back to his spiritual home with so many sons and daughters. This was the high point of our India experience with Srila Prabhupada, entering the magic spiritual realm of Krishna itself. Everything he had been teaching us for years came into focus. We could see now, oh, this is Vrindavan. Such intimate, sweet exchanges we had.
This visit in 1971 of Srila Prabhupada was very, very historical in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. It was the inauguration of the fulfillment of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda's desire that the holy names of Krishna be spread to every town and village throughout the world. Lord Chaitanya went to Vrindavan and he sent the 6 Goswamis there to establish it as a place of pilgrimage for people all over the world. When Rupa and Sanatan went to Vrindavan on Lord Chaitanya's order, they were there to establish it as a place of pilgrimage for people all over the world. Obviously for people who would become Vaishnavas from every town and village in the world. That was Lord Chaitanya's vision. And this visit was the beginning of the fulfillment. The first time Vaishnavas from the West who were committed to Krishna consciousness in a relatively large group came on pilgrimage to the holy Dham of Sri Braj.
Like he's so healthy and exuberant. He's back home. This is where he hatched out the whole Hare Krishna movement. This is where Krishna empowered him to come west. Little Saraswati, she was one of his favorites. She went around, followed him wherever he went. Sometimes he would grab her hand and walk with her. If Saraswati didn't come to his room every morning around 8 o'clock, he would sometimes ask, "And where is Saraswati?" He expected to see her every morning. And quite often he would play some trick on her when she came, either to make her laugh or cry. But he would always make up and give her some nice sweet. Here he's showing us the sights, showing us around the samadhis of great Vaishnavas behind Radha Damodar temple, explaining a little bit about who was buried where. Those days it was all run down and practically abandoned. Well, most of Vrindavan was practically run down and abandoned. We used to think that Raman Reti was far out of town. Prabhupada revived the whole spiritual life of India, starting with Vrindavan. Now a flourishing, spiritualized city because of Prabhupada. Of course, Rupa Goswami's samadhi there, Prabhupada's favorite place. He used to say that Rupa Goswami inspired him to go to the West and spread Krishna consciousness, as he would sit in his room and gaze out on his samadhi year after year and chant and read, translate.
When we arrived in Vrindavan, I remember walking into Srila Prabhupada's room and paying my obeisances and saying, "Srila Prabhupada, what should we do now?" And he looked down at me and he said, "Just wander." So that's exactly what I did. I just went out into the Vrindavan village and everything I'd read about in Nectar of Devotion and Krishna book, I was thinking of those things. And I wanted to take rest under a Kalpa Vriksha tree. It's something I'd wanted to do for a long time, so I just actually found one tree in the forest, and I actually fell asleep and slept very soundly and very deeply for a couple hours, and when I woke up it was evening time, and I didn't really know where everybody was, but I heard in the background the kirtan going on, Hare Krishna, and so I followed the sound, and I arrived at this big program where all Srila Prabhupada and all the devotees were, and the lecture had just stopped, and they were serving up prasadam. So it was a great day in my life, just the way it worked out.
Prabhupada was giving a lecture in a garden. There was a small pandal set up, and many Brijavasis came to attend that. It was somewhere in the area of Radha Govinda temple. And somehow or other I came late, and when I arrived, Prabhupada was just leaving, walking through a field back to his car. People were lined up on both sides to offer obeisances. I offered obeisances, and Srila Prabhupada stopped in front of me. And when I got up, Prabhupada very affectionately showered his mercy upon me and told me how he was very pleased that I was so much attached to living in Vrindavan.
And I was so ecstatic, and we got into the ambassador car at the Delhi airport. Sharma Sundar was there, and Prabhupada was sitting in the front, and we were riding to Vrindavan, and Prabhupada was quiet, and I was thinking, he's going to give some spiritual sloka about Vrindavan that inspires. Prabhupada was quiet. Finally, I hear Prabhupada clear his throat, and he said, cement. We must get cement and build a water tower like that. He pointed out the water tower so we could have sweet water.
But look at that. No, I'll never forget that kirtan. It was like, you could feel demigods showering flowers. And the people were stunned. They'd never, because the way we did kirtan was Prabhupada did kirtan different than the traditional, like Bengali or something. And when we first went to India, we were chanting like Prabhupada, and it was like people had never heard. It was so potent. Prabhupada leading and the disciples following. These people had never heard anything like it, and they were just thunderstruck. I just loved it. I mean, kirtan was my savior. It was my shelter. It washed everything away. It washed away all anxieties. To me, the perfection of life is to be with Srila Prabhupada and kirtan. It's like all I want in life, and I don't care where it is or when it is. That's just all I want.
Now, when Srila Prabhupada came to Vrindavan, it was after he had left for less than 5 years. He had gone away to America, presumably to die amongst infidels or be lured by the temptations of the West. But anyhow, when he came back, surrounded by disciples, after having made a famous tour through Surat and other parts of India, big Pandal programs in Calcutta, in Bombay, in New Delhi, that were in the newspapers, were traveling by word of mouth. So when Prabhupada appeared there with a few of his many devotees, it was an astonishing event that people could not ignore. And when he marched through, it was a triumphant march. They did not fail to be deeply impressed, because who else in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, even from the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, could lay claim to such a feat?
Srila Prabhupada took us to many holy spots in Vrindavan. We would go by bus and he would ride in his ambassador car. And here we are at Brahmanda Ghat in Gokul, where Mother Yasoda saw the universe in Krishna's mouth. Srila Prabhupada is telling the story, much to our delight. His eyes get big when Mother Yasoda sees the creation. For most of us, this is the first time we'd seen the Jamuna, and we were very eager to bathe in her transcendental waters.
The bus went to Gokul, and we came out. Dinanath Prabhu was leading the kirtan, and Prabhupada came out of his ambassador car, which was in front of the bus. And we walked for some time behind Prabhupada doing Harinam Sankirtan, and Prabhupada stopped us, turned around, and said, "This is the wrong Gokul. This is Ballabhacharya's Gokul. We want to go to Mahavan Gokul." So then we all got back in the buses. And from there, from what I remember, we went to Brahmanda Ghat, where we saw the beauty of the holy river Jamuna. Prabhupada came down with us, and he sprinkled water on his head. And then he told all the devotees that they should have full bath. And I believe Prabhupada was feeling somewhat ill that day, so he said that he was not going to take full bath. So he was sitting on the steps, and the devotees were bathing, and Prabhupada was watching us. He was so happy. His disciples, who he loved so very, very dearly, who he gave his life and soul to give them Krishna's love. Here they were in Gokul, at the holy banks of Brahmanda Ghat, happily taking their baths in the sacred river Jamuna. What that must have meant for Prabhupada.
He's sitting there watching us take bath, and pretty soon he wants to go in with us. What can I do? My devotees want me. Come on, Prabhupada, come on in. Here we are, saying our Gayatris on sacred threads, standing in the Jamuna River. Ah, there he comes. Prabhupada. Oh.
A few of the ladies were kind of clustered together, and Pulika was there. And at some point we noticed that Srila Prabhupada was going in the water, although at first it didn't look like he was going to go in. Suddenly it was like, Prabhupada's going in. You know, I looked at Pulika, we had the same reaction. We're going in too. We have to be in there with Prabhupada. And we have to do it fast because he's going to say Gayatri, and we wanted to say Gayatri with him. But both of us had only been in India for like a month. And we knew that the ladies bathed in the Yamuna, but we didn't know how they did it. You know, should we go in with our full saris and then walk around dripping wet? Because we only had a few seconds. Pulika was down to her slip. And I was like, okay, me too. And it didn't matter anyway, because as soon as
we hit the water, we went right under. So we were up to our necks in water anyway, so we were covered. And we wanted to get as close to Prabhupada as we could while he was saying Gayatri, and we got really close, like within 10 feet of him. And just our little heads, were like scrunched under the water, and we got to say Gayatri with Prabhupada that day. And to me, that's the most memorable experience of the whole thing, was that Gayatri in the water with Prabhupada so close.
During the afternoons, Prabhupada would give darshan, and the devotees were sent out to do Harinam Sankirtan. During that time, I had the great fortune of sitting in the room and attending all of his darshans each day. They were very intimate. Brijabasis would come, his old friends, godbrothers would come, Goswamis would come, sometimes guests would come, and Prabhupada would just sometimes speak to them very informally, sometimes he would preach to them very strongly, and sometimes he just had loving conversations. I'll never forget when Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj came to see Prabhupada. I happened to be walking down the street one day, and I met Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj and told him I was going to see Srila Prabhupada, and he very eager, he said, "I will go with you, I want to see Swamiji," or Swami Maharaj. He called him Swami Maharaj. And when we came, there was a guard who was one of the more senior devotees. He was standing at the stairways guarding who was coming up to the darshan. And of course, he welcomed me to come up because he knew that Prabhupada was favorable to me attending the darshans each night. But when he saw Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, he stopped him. He said, "Who are you?" And when he was introduced as Prabhupada's godbrother, he said, no, you cannot go. So Babaji Maharaj wanted to go anyway, and he wanted to stop him. And I told that devotee, "Please ask Prabhupada. He's one of the most beloved devotees of Vrindavan, especially in Gaudiya Math." And a messenger came back and said, "Yes, Prabhupada immediately wants to see him." So we went up together, and Srila Prabhupada, when he saw Babaji Maharaj, he was sitting behind a little desk, and there was maybe about 6 or 7 people that he was talking to in the room, and Prabhupada got up, and they embraced, and they were just laughing and talking in Bengali. Prabhupada brought Babaji Maharaj to sit next to him behind the desk, and the whole time they were just laughing and talking and looking at each other with so much affection. And the 6 or 7 people who were there were completely forgotten, so they left. And I just sat there, just watching this interaction. I couldn't understand a word of it because they were speaking Bengali language. But I learned so much, not by their language, but just by seeing the genuine love that these two great personalities had for each other, and the intimate relationship they shared. And they were constantly saying Hare Krishna and laughing. I understood then that this is the goal of life, to have this type of love with Vaishnavas in sharing the mission of the spiritual master and pure love for Radha and Krishna. I think they were together for probably almost 45 minutes to an hour. And then Prabhupada made sure Babaji Maharaj got nice prasad.
we went to Mr. Saraf's house, and he had just decided to give us the land in Raman Reti. There was a slip of paper that said yes and a slip of paper that said no. Our friend Shama Devi from London and Kenya and Vrindavan also wanted this piece of land. She had a ashram down the street in Raman Reti, and this would be an expansion for her. She was vying for it. Radharani arranged so that we picked the right slip of paper that said yes, and so Mr. Sharaf was finalizing this process at his house, signing the papers, the deeds, and Shamashunda was with me, and he had a portable typewriter, and he was making this draft. At the same time, Gaurachan Goswami and Madan Mohan Goswami had shown up because they were contending and wanting money for Prabhupada's rooms in Radha Damodar Temple. At the same time, Prabhupada had sent me to Mathura to arrange for these rooms for life as a seva. It's a technicality, and so we were also drawing up this draft. The interesting thing is that even though Madan Mohan Goswami and Gaurachan Goswami lived across the same courtyard in Radha Damodar Temple, they were not speaking, and they were both in Goswami families. So Prabhupada put Gaurachan Goswami in one room, Madan Mohan Goswami in another room. I was going from room to room. Sarmasunda was making up documents. At the same time, Shama Devi came with a member of parliament and a policeman to try and contest this land being given to Prabhupada. We put her in another room. So Mr. Sharaf's house was full of people who were not talking and arguing, contending, and Sarmasunda was making up documents. At this point, Krishna Das Babaji shows up, Prabhupada's godbrother. Somehow or other, he always knew when Prabhupada was coming to Vrindavan. This was not announced, there was no emails. And he shows up from Radhakund, and he laughs and chants. He didn't speak much. He laughed a lot, he chanted a lot. One time he left his bead bag in a nun's room, and we immediately had a poll how fast he would be to return to get it. And I said, well, at least within the minute. And sure enough, he came back and got his beads. So I called Prabhupada the ringmaster, because he was like a circus ringmaster, taming clowns and lions and contesting people. And all the documents were drawn up. We got the rooms in Radha Damodar for life. We got the land. Shama Devi couldn't do anything. And Krishna Das chanted and laughed. And it was a wonderful day at Mr. Sarif's house.
After the incredibly successful Pandal in Delhi, where tens of thousands of people were coming every night to hear Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada took just a few of us, 20 or 30, to Vrindavan. So after all the fanfare in Delhi, the lights, and distributing prasadam to all those people and the dignitaries that came, here we were in this simple village with Srila Prabhupada, and I think all of us, certainly myself, felt how much Prabhupada cared for us. That after this big preaching program, he would take the time and the trouble to bring us to Vrindavan. We stayed in a small place, Saraf Bhavan, which is about a mile from Loy Bazaar. And every day we would go by bus to different holy places. We went to Govardhan, Radhakund, Barsana.
When Srila Prabhupada was being carried on that Rajabasi palanquin up and down the hill of Barsana, the devotees were just so blissful, so happy to see Prabhupada being carried in this way. And although it appeared like a very uncomfortable way of traveling, Prabhupada was bouncing back and forth. Srila Prabhupada looked so blissful. At times he smiled so blissfully, just so happy to be amongst his devotees, roaming through the hills and mountains of Barsana, Sri Radharani's place of pastimes.
In Govardhan, Prabhupada was taking prasadam. Malata used to travel with